Hey everyone, it's your American F1 Journal here. We had a chance to catch up with none other than NASCAR icon Bill Lester as part of our Drivers of Color series here on the Rundown. The Berkeley graduate made his NASCAR debut in 1999, becoming the first African American to run in the Busch Series. Lester also participated in a number of Nextel Cup Series from 2008 to 2010. The 15-year Hewlett-Packard software engineer also spoke with us about a multitude of topics, including diversity and inclusion in motorsport. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation with Bill Lester. So I guess first off, are you staying safe? How are things going over there where you are? And how have you been handling things during this time, during the pandemic and the lockdown?
Everybody's staying safe here. We are bored in the house, like that song goes. Even 4th of July, you couldn't go anywhere, even though a lot of people went places, which I don't understand, but we kind of stayed close to home. And the kids, I got two teenage sons, 17 and 14. And so, even though they weren't real fireworks, we had some sparklers and we goofed around throwing sparklers in the air and stuff like that. And just social distanced and, just tried to stay safe. I have a pretty good friend who is coming out of coronavirus and COVID-19, and it's just real. It just made it really real for me, and I just don't want anybody to be affected. My mother-in-law is actually staying with us here in Georgia. She's from California. She's from Northern California in Daly City. Mm-hmm. And before the lockdown really started taking place, we flew her back out here so she would be with us because she's on her own, and we knew that if things got sketchy like they've become, that she wouldn't have really any infrastructure. So we got, my family and then my mother-in-law. So the house is big enough.
Exactly. You really have to watch out, because our elderly are very important in this time that we watch after them. My mom's locked down right now. She's not going anywhere. So I have to make sure she's safe.
Yeah, exactly. We could not bring anything in that might, affect their immune system and, their ability to respond. So we're being extremely careful. We haven't been out to dinner, and I don't know how long. I don't even know what that's like anymore. Everything is either, purchased and bought here with regard to food that we might order in, or we're just cooking, but haven't been to a movie theater and I don't know how long. And, I feel the worst for my sons because this is a period of time where they should be out there hanging out with their friends, interacting with them and all that kind of thing. And they're not doing that, and so it's sad. And we don't even know what the situation is going to be like once the fall comes because, we don't know if it's going to be a continuation of digital learning or if indeed they'll be able to go back to school for some period of time. They're talking now about maybe 1 week at school and then 2 weeks at home learning, back to school for another week. It's just all convoluted. So nobody knows what's going to happen. So it's kind of, apprehensive times.
It is. It's some very interesting times that we're in right now. And I think going forward, it's going to definitely, I think it's changing the landscape of the world and, how we do things and interact with each other, and especially here in the United States. We're so social, we're so used to having our habits. We're creatures of habit at times. And, now we have to change those habits. And we've seen lately that, in recent times that it's difficult for some people, because they're used to going out.
Yeah, it's just odd just from the standpoint of, I always instill in my sons that when you meet somebody, you look them square in the eye and give them a firm handshake. There's no handshaking now. It's crazy. Everything I kind of taught them is being thrown right out the window. So it's really difficult and it's uncomfortable. And, one of the few things that I can enjoy still is I play golf, and it's one of the best social distancing sports or games or whatever you want to call it that you can participate in. So every Saturday morning, man, I'm like first tee time.
I used to golf a little bit, but I do more bowling. I'm more of a bowler.
Okay. So can you do that now?
Bowling, a lot of bowling alleys are not open yet. So we can't bowl outside, unfortunately. So
it must really be hurting.
Yeah, it's killing me right now. Have you had a chance to get in? And obviously you haven't been able to do any racing or, any karting. I know you've been doing some karting, before this happened. You haven't had a chance to get on the track at all since this has been going on, huh?
No, I haven't. It's not even worth the risk from my perspective. I just am enjoying the fact that at least I can watch some of the other guys out there racing. They're still running the NASCAR races, as you saw, and Formula One kicked off this past weekend. I was great. It was great to see that. Wasn't the result I wanted for Lewis, but all that's going to do is make him hungrier.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be an interesting season, with only 8 races, as we know so far. We're not sure if there are going to be any added ones. If the United States Grand Prix is going to happen, it's not looking likely. I mean, given what's happened in Texas, there's been a rise in Texas, and we were hopeful that maybe that might get added to the calendar, but it's a very unpredictable season right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything's up in the air. Even with regards to the NASCAR races, where they are, I guess, have an environment where they've been really the most safe. Jimmy Johnson just got afflicted by COVID-19, and he tested positive, even though he was asymptomatic. And you just don't know what's going to happen there. And then we're trying, as open up the NBA season, and Major League Baseball is up in flux. I mean, all these athletes are coming down with it.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, and nobody obviously knows what's going to happen. But I just wish the leadership at the top of our country would take a slightly more proactive stance on doing the right thing. Making sure that American citizens are safe, leading by example by wearing a mask, and stop being so darn cavalier about situation. But I'm not going to try to bring the politics into it. But I just still really believe that if you set an example for the country to follow, that's a good thing. And the example that's being set, I'm in so disagreement with that it's not even funny. It's whatever.
I think sometimes people miss that it's not necessarily about them when it comes to this situation. It's about other people. It's about spreading. It's about looking out. For people like your mother. Your in-laws and my mother, and other elderlies or immunocompromised individuals. That can this could really seriously afflict. I have relatives that are in nursing in the medical field, and they see this firsthand, in the hospital, in the ICU, and it's serious. And I think if anybody had a chance to see this, firsthand from what they see, I think it would really wake people up to see, the amount of people that this is hurting, this is afflicting, the amount of people who die, on an hourly basis at times. When it comes to this, and how rampant it is.
Yeah, it would make it real instead of just a news story. When it's a news story, it's just kind of isolated from you. It doesn't really hit home. But like you said, if they were front and center in terms of what's going on the front lines, I think it would change a lot of attitudes.
Definitely. Now, I wanted, since you touched on Formula One, Formula One's rolled out some initiatives to increase diversity, inclusion. Chase Carey's going to donate from his own personal funds $1 million to help with apprenticeships and internships inside Formula One. And also establishing a task force to help tackle the situation. If you had a chance to talk to that task force, give the feedback, what would be some of your suggestions on how to handle that with Formula One?
Well, no, I haven't talked to anybody there. They haven't reached out to me, but I was impressed with the We Stand as One hashtag that was being, promoted around the circuit this past weekend. I liked the Black Lives Matter with the fist that Lewis Hamilton had on his helmet. I thought that was really a strong statement as well. But no, I just think the whole Formula One community understands that, we should all be treated equally. We were all created equally, but we're not all treated equally. And I think a lot of the disparity that has definitely been prevalent here in the States is being seen worldwide. And, I just don't know what it's like over in Europe per se. It's been a while since I've been overseas, but, I think that what they see here with the United States being typically has been a leader internationally. I think we've made some missteps as a result of, what's been happening with our presidency has made us, not as favorable or enviable a position as we once were. But having said all that, there are definitely some things that can be done. I think the key thing is that what's happened here in the States is as a result of the fact that we as people of color are tired of the racial inequity and systemic racism and police brutality and all the things that have been taking place. And the situation is different now than some of the outcries we've had in the past, because more people than just us are rebelling against the system of systemic racism. We're not just by ourselves in this movement. we have support across the, across the situation, the landscape. And so I think that ears are open, people are paying attention, people are being receptive, and it really remains to be seen what real steps are going to be taken. But what happens here is that there's been a culture of white privilege, where most of them have been in positions of power and authority for so long that they don't know what it's like being not them, right? And so when we have this Black Lives Matter movement, we're not asking for, what they think is Black power or Black supremacy. No, we're just asking for Black equality. Equality amongst everybody, right? That's all. Treat us all the same. And it seems to me that a lot of the things I've seen from social media and such is that they feel they're giving up something by allowing the landscape to be equal. But it's going to take a long time for the landscape to be equal because the situation has been unbalanced for so long. We don't control what's going on in corporate America. Most all the decisions that take place in corporate America and in the board rooms are by white males. Some white females have broken through, and there have been some people of color that have broken through, but very few. And so until we are at a table that's got everybody on the same playing field, essentially, it's going to be difficult. And so, what are we going to do to change things? Well, let's make it so that it's not a situation where we're asking for them to do something specifically to give us a handout or anything like that. No, we're just asking, don't disqualify us based on our color. Just treat us equally. So it's really got to be, the first thing has got to be a mind shift, a paradigm shift in terms of the way people think. And it just hasn't been like that. And I don't know how long it's going to take before that really takes place, because unfortunately, people see color, people see differences. And sometimes, or I should say more so than not, act accordingly. It's always like somebody has to be on top of somebody else to get somewhere. And, and it's unfortunate that that's been the case, but that's got to change. And I think that now that we're in the era that we're in, the reception is much greater than it has been in the past. So really what's going on right now is, I think, awareness and, maybe some empathy, but we really need to have some things take place that are tangible and measurable to try to get to a goal. Exactly what those things are in Formula One, I mean, really, how many Black drivers have there been in Formula One? I mean? I know that Willie T tested an F1 car way back when, never got to the track to compete. And outside of Lewis Hamilton, I'm remiss to think of anybody else. Has there been anybody else?
No, there hasn't. Lewis Hamilton is the only and the first Black British driver to break into the sport and to be as successful as he is. What is that for you as a Black driver, a Black race car driver? What does that mean to see Lewis Hamilton achieve those accolades, achieve those goals that he has in that sport, even though he's a British driver and you're an African American race car driver?
Yeah, I'm still extremely proud of him because he is a driver of color. He is just not the regular, the cookie cutter, typical standard race car driver. He has has somewhat of a diverse background, being his, father's Black, his mother's white. So, by all intents and purposes, he's Black. So no, I don't care if he's British. I don't care if he's Italian. I don't care, what his nationality is or what country he comes from. The fact that he is of Black descent or African American or African descent is, really heartwarming for me to see that. And for him to do as well as he's done. He was able to take advantage of a very, very rare opportunity. I'm sure everybody knows the story about how his father got him into a go-kart at a young age, but if it wasn't for Ron Dennis, he wouldn't be where he is. Ron Dennis saw his talent and brought him under the McLaren fold. And, the rest, they say, is history because they groomed him through the ranks. And so he proved that, it was more than just his color of his skin. He is talented on any, stretch of the imagination or benchmark that you want to put him through. So, I mean, it's great that he's doing what he's doing. He represents himself extremely well. He definitely is a leader for change, is a change agent. And I think, is doing all he can within his platform to evoke change. And I think that's wonderful. I think that, we should all see each other as human beings, not, you're better than I am, or you're worse than I am, or whatever the case is, because of your color. It should be because of, like Martin Luther King said, it's the content of your character. It's not the color of your skin.
I think that couldn't be put any better. What I want to ask, like, what have been some of your challenges when you were coming into racing, and then moving forward with that, what do you think are going to be the challenges with Formula One, reaching out to communities of color and say, especially here in the States, in that path, for inspiring race car drivers of color wanting to get into that level, that top level of motorsport?
So I kind of got your question kind of got long for me. What was the first part of it?
The first part is we'll cover what you had to deal with in your journey into becoming a race car driver and getting into NASCAR and in sports car racing. What were those challenges and that you faced when you were coming into it?
Yeah, well, they were plentiful. I was an anomaly throughout my whole racing career. I did not come from a racing family, wasn't born with wealth. The only reason I made it as a race car driver is because my father took me to a race when I was just shy of 8 years old. And it was because he knew of my love of cars and speed. So, a friend of his said, I heard your son likes cars and stuff. Why don't you take him to a race? And so my father's like, yeah, maybe I'll do that. And so he took me to a race when I was very young, and it blew me away. It set the hook. And I was like, wow, I would love to be able to do something like this. Nothing moved me like these cars going by me at 160, 170 miles an hour. I mean, it was intoxicating. But when I looked around the racetrack, even though I didn't make a big deal of it, I noticed nobody looked like my father and I. Nobody else there at the racetrack looked like us. But the good thing is that it was a sports car race in Northern California, and California is a progressive state. Had he taken me to a race at Darlington, South Carolina, or Talladega, Alabama, or something like that, I think I probably had a completely different idea about it, wanting to go racing, because it would have probably been so uncomfortable, we wouldn't have stayed long enough to enjoy the race. But we enjoyed the race through and through, and I was just enamored by what it is I experienced. And I knew then that I wanted to be a race car driver. But again, I didn't get that go-kart that Lewis Hamilton got in his single-digit years. That just wasn't in the offing for me. My folks were like, no, we don't do this racing stuff. We don't know anything about this racing stuff. It's not something that's easily accessible. Racing isn't something like a stick and ball sport where you can just go outside and play with your friends, right? You got to have a go-kart or some kind of motorized vehicle. You got to have a circuit to run it on, right? You can't just pick up a ball and throw it to your friend, or go play basketball, or whatever the case is. It's a concerted effort to get to a racetrack. And where I grew up, that just wasn't in the cards. That just wasn't happening. So I did the traditional stick and ball sports growing up, but then I got my driver's license, and it was game on. It was the Fast and the Furious before it was a movie. I was doing all sorts of illegal things that I don't condone, right? But some people saw what I was able to do, and I had a reputation as a street racer, and people said, look, before you kill yourself or somebody else doing what you're doing, take it to a racetrack. And I was like, okay, well, that'd be great to take it to a racetrack. How do you do that, right? Because I didn't know how to go racing. Well, needless to say, the common denominator amongst all this is you got to have money. So what I did is I immersed myself in technology, and I went to Cal Berkeley, which was at the time the second highest school in engineering in the country to MIT. I got a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. And I was getting that degree right there effectively at the beginning of the high-tech boom. So I knew that if I got that piece of paper, I could write my ticket. And effectively, that's what I did. With that first paycheck that I got from Hewlett-Packard Computer Company, where I started working in the Silicon Valley, I went and started going racing at SCCA, which is Sports Car Club of America. And so my first year, I was Rookie of the Year for Northern California. And then the next year, I was Northern California Road Racing Champion for my class. And I thought immediately, with having accomplished that, I was going pro racing, right? No. No. But even before that, let me tell you, when I showed up at SCCA driver school, I was the only one of color. When I was out there racing, I was pretty much the only one of color. I even had some folks coming up going like, why are you out here? You guys don't race. And I was like, excuse me, I'm here to race, you know? I mean, so there's been a little bit of pushback and a little bit of, you know, unwelcomeness, but I look beyond that because I knew that I enjoyed racing. And so anyway, after I started, you know, doing so well in amateur racing, I thought the doors of corporate America be swinging wide open, right? It's like, here I am doing well. It's time to go pro.
Right.
You know, the phone calls were not returned, and a lot of it I think had to do with the fact that in the sponsorship proposals, you know, I put a nice picture of myself in there, and they're probably looking at like, nah, I'm not going to probably do something that we're not comfortable doing yet as a company, you know. So what I did is then I gathered enough family and friends and enough of my savings from working in the company to put myself through my first pro race, which is an IMSA GTO race that I did at Monterey. No, I did at Sears Point in Sonoma in 1989. And I did really well there. And then I thought, you know, again, corporate America was going to come running. They didn't. I did some SCCA Trans Am races on the pro level as well. And no, once again, corporate America was not responsive. And so I had a 15-year career at Hewlett-Packard before, with my wife's blessing, who I got married to in between this time. She said, look, you're not getting any younger and you're not getting any easier to live with. Devote yourself to trying to make your dream a reality, or say that you gave it your best and it wasn't meant to happen. So we gave ourselves a 3-year window by which I would try to devote all of my time and attention to becoming a full-time professional race car driver. I went on leave of absence from HP for 6 months, and then after 6 months, I put the corporate job in the rearview mirror. I said goodbye to HP. And people thought I was absolutely crazy. They're like, wait a minute, you're successful. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not successful. They go, no, you are successful. You got a 6-figure income. You're managing a couple dozen engineers. And I'm like, I don't define that as success. I define success as happiness. And I was completely unhappy and unfulfilled with what it is I was doing. I was good at it, but it wasn't what I felt was my calling. I felt I should be racing a car. You know, I felt that I was getting given gifts, God-given gifts to go out there and do it. And so that's why I left HP, to try to just do it whole hog, just with both feet, not dip a toe in the water, not try to do the 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then try to be, you know, a weekend warrior. I couldn't do it. I wasn't effective. I couldn't do what was necessary without devoting my full time and attention to this pursuit. So lo and behold, after some pro races here and there, I got my big break because I was given the chance to test a stock car. And it was a strange situation as to why this happened. I was introduced to a guy named Ed Renzi, who is a mutual friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, Bill, have you ever raced a heavy car? He goes, you know, I've seen you race these sports cars and stuff like that, but have you ever raced a heavy car? I'm like, well, what's a heavy car? He said, a stock car. And I'm like, no, I've never raced a stock car. I've never even been on oval or been on dirt, which is like the common denominator amongst all the NASCAR drivers. They say, we all grew up on dirt. Well, I've never seen dirt, okay, except to go and play in. So anyway, that's a misnomer. But he gave me a test in an ARCA car, which is, you know, competing series to NASCAR. And I thought it was going to be an exclusive test all by myself. And we wind up going to Anderson, Indiana, to a 1/4-mile high bank short track with a figure-8 infield. You know, where they do the demolition derby stuff. And it was a full-on ARCA race weekend. I mean, the heavy hitters in ARCA were there. I mean, Frank Kimmel, Ken Schrader. And I was like, looking at all these haulers around and all that stuff and all these cars. I'm like, what is going on here, right? They back out a primer gray backup car to the primary car that Ed had entered into the race. And he said, okay, Bill, show me what you got. And I'm like, what do you mean show you what I got? He said, okay, here's your track. Here's your car. Let me see if you got any skills. And I was like, okay. Threw my helmet on and all that kind of stuff. And had the times that I put in practice been in qualifying, I would have been top 10 starting position. But he wasn't ready to enter me in the race. He just wanted to see if I could conduct myself on a race weekend during an ARCA practice. And sure enough, I could. And he said, listen, no promises, but I'm going to try to get you into NASCAR. And lo and behold, I became the first black driver to make an Xfinity or Busch Grand National start back then in 1999 when I made my debut at Watkins Glen on the road course there. Then I did subsequently a couple of one-off truck races. But then Dodge created a diversity program in 2001. and I got the nod in 2002. Willie T got the first opportunity and ran the number 8 Dodge Ram in 2001. And then they did the program and reevaluated it, reassessed it. And I was given the opportunity to run the truck from 2002 to 2003, at which point I became a full-time professional race car driver at 40 years of age. And then I made my, well, I should just say Cup debut, but at the time it was Nextel Cup debut in 2006 at Atlanta Motor Speedway at 45 years of age.
And that's an amazing achievement. Did you and Willie ever cross paths? Did you?
We absolutely did. When I was working in the Silicon Valley, that's kind of like Cupertino, California, which is a rock's throw away from San Jose, which is Willie's hometown. And so Willie and I were fast friends. We were really good friends back when I was working in the tech sector, because I would like jump, away from the office at lunch, go hang out with Willie, try to pick his brain, hang out with him, see what he was doing to become, or just to be a professional race car driver, learn all the things that I should do and all the things I shouldn't do, because Willie T and I are cut from very different cloths. he grew up, pretty much blue collar on a ranch and all that stuff, shooting guns. And you see him now, he's always wearing a cowboy hat if he's not wearing his uppity cap. And I was as white collar as they came, 4-year degree from Cal Berkeley and all that kind of stuff. And, but the fact is, he was where I wanted to be. He was a professional race car driver, and I was trying to become one. So I was kind of like learning from, or at the feet of the master, because he was where I wanted to be. I watched him in Trans Am and IMSA, and I watched him in, the Indy 500, and he was the big dude. He was the big man on campus, right? So for him and I to become friends, which by the way happened as a fluke. Let me tell you how we met. Remember I told you I went to SCCA driving school. That was at Sears Point.
Right.
And for whatever reason, Willie T was there at Sears Point. And I don't know to this day why he was there, but he was there. And when I was in between sessions, on-track sessions during driving school, he came up to me. He walked up to me, and I was like, looking at him, I was like, I know who that is and everything. And he walked up to me, and he goes, I've been watching you. In as deep as Willie T voice, I've been watching you. You have what it takes to make it in this sport. And I was blown away that he just, unsolicited came out and said that, because he had been watching me. I guess I was doing really well in driver school, And at that point, he gave me his information, and I reached out to him, and, we, at that point, started a great friendship. So yeah, I've known Willie T for a long time. We don't hang out really at all anymore. He's gone on to Texas, and, I guess there's a lot of water underneath the bridge, but for whatever reason, yeah, we don't really communicate much, but he's still, pushing the fight, and just trying to make sure that this sport becomes more inclusive. He's very, very hard on NASCAR. He's thinking it's all lip service. Up to this point, there has been a lot of lip service. I hope that changed. I've reached out to Steve Phelps, the president of NASCAR, who I've known for, since mid-2000s, and told him that I was impressed with the positioning that they've taken, and that I'm there to help them. I really want NASCAR to be successful in opening their doors and making it welcome to everybody. The blue collar redneck is, that market's tapped out for them, and they know that. All you got to do is look at the stands, and they're being taken out. There was one point where I was racing there in the mid 2000s. That was the height of NASCAR. I mean, on a race weekend, there'd be 150, 160,000 people. Before the pandemic, they were lucky if they got 50,000 people. Most of the numbers I heard for crowd was like 30 to 40,000 people. So it was really on the decline, because again, their traditional fan base was tapped out. All of them got aged out, and the millennials that came behind them just weren't interested in NASCAR. It just, didn't resonate with them. So, there are a lot of closet NASCAR fans of color. And I know that because when I was out there on the Truck Series, platform for a number of years, I saw the hue of the stands change. And then when I went away, it reverted right back to its typical self, because we didn't feel comfortable being out there in an environment, for the most part, where we couldn't rally behind and support one of our own. That's really what it comes down to. That's why golf became so popular, because of, what Tiger Woods has done, excuse me, and, tennis has become so popular because of what Arthur Ashe has done before Venus and Serena. And, we like winners. That's all there is to it. And if we see people that are out there that look like us doing something, we support them. We support each other. And so now that Bubba's come on the scene, the hue has started to change again. As much as it can in a pandemic, it can't change that much, but it still has begun to shift. And as long as we can get more of us out there, it's going to continue to shift. And that's really what NASCAR's challenge is, And so I don't know what's behind the curtain in terms of their plans, but they know that I'm there, hopefully, to help guide them through this change, in period of what's going on. I know for a fact that they have just made an appointment for Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion by appointing a guy by the name of Brandon Thompson, who's got 17 years there. He's a brother who's got 17 years there with the company. And so I hope he's able to affect change. And, I guess it just becomes a matter of wait and see. Let's just kind of see what happens.
Yeah. What do you think sports like NASCAR, Formula One, especially we know Formula One is trying to gain more visibility here in the United States. What's going to be some of those key things that they need to do going forward to broaden, their audience and bring in new fans?
Well, the difficult thing with Formula One is that it's a one-time hit, right? They have COTA, and I was thinking they were going to have a second venue, but when Formula One only comes to the United States once a year, it's very difficult without a lot of, promotion to get people to get out there, for them to know about it. The reason why NASCAR is so popular is because they race virtually every weekend, and people know that there is going to be a NASCAR race. People have absolutely, unless you're an insider and you follow the sport like I do or like you do, people don't know when Formula One is coming. By the time they know Formula One is coming, it's pretty much gone, right? And most of the drivers, or all the drivers, are non-American. We have to have an American in F1 who is going to be, prominent, promoted, front and center. All these guys that are coming from Italy and England and, Germany and all that kind of stuff, we're not identifying with. They don't matter to us. We are all about, like American pride, not Southern, rebel pride as far as I'm concerned. I sure hope that stigma starts to continue to go by the wayside, but American pride, we need an American driver, and we need at least one more venue. As a matter of fact, I thought they were trying to get one in Miami, and it seemed like that all became unraveled. But
there was talk of Miami for a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was Indianapolis was there on, for a minute. And, traditionally they had the Vegas Formula One race, but there's only always been one race. We need to have more than one race so we can gain some momentum in terms of Formula One. And most importantly, we need to have an American driver. I mean, I think the last driver who was really trying to do it was Michael Andretti, I think. Yes. Alex Rossi was trying to do something, but I don't think that ever materialized. But, until we have an American driver that we can rally behind, just like, blacks coming out to the racetrack, if they see a black driver out there, behind the wheel, we need to see an American driver behind the wheel. Then It becomes real to Americans.
We've got an American team with Haas, but you're like you said, we don't have the rest of the puzzle put together with an American driver in F1. And we've sort of adopted Lewis because a lot of people I've talked to and met, know Formula One through Lewis, and his platform and social media, because he's got so many followers on social media, people discover him and they say, oh, I learned about Formula One from meeting him. So he's sort of, been adopted essentially a little bit from America. But yes, of course, we need to have an American driver in Formula One. And hopefully at some point we will get someone in there. But that, like I was talking to you earlier, which was the second part of the question, was the path. There's a path if you go to Europe and you race in, F2, F3, and you work your way into F1. But for a lot of drivers here in the States, they're really, there's a difficult path trying to get from here into F1. So I was going to ask you, what do you think could change or what could happen in terms of trying to build a path? Is there something that you think Formula One could do to help sort of build a path for American drivers that want to get into the sport?
Well, I think to be serious about Formula One, you have to make the commitment to go overseas, first and foremost. You have to go over to England and you have to start out in, the Formula 1600 and stuff like that, the feeder series that get you up to Formula 3, Formula 2, and, eventually Formula 1. You can't just, do it over here and then hope you're going to be successful over there. They race very differently over in Europe than we do here. I've heard it. I don't know for a fact from personal experience, but I heard it from enough drivers that have tried to do it and that have done it, that you can't run like you race over here in the States, then all of a sudden try to show up over there in Europe and think you're going to be successful. You have to start at a very young age, and you have to go up through the European ranks so that you know how cutthroat their driving and their racing is. It's not like ours is. I think ours is pretty, watered down compared to what's going on over there. I mean, because there are so many people trying to get to F1 worldwide, right? We have our pool over here in terms of racing in America. But think about our small pool over here in America versus racing in a venue where all the participants are coming from all around the world, right? So it's a much bigger, much more cutthroat, much more difficult ladder to climb. And if you're going to be serious about trying to be an F1 driver, you need to start at the grassroots over there in Europe and go through there. Now, that's a very difficult proposition, granted, because it means living over in Europe, just embedding yourself in the European culture, probably in England, because, they speak English there. It'd be a whole lot harder to try to do it in Italy and try to learn the language and all that kind of stuff. As an American, they would frown on us anyway, but in England, I think you have a reasonable chance. That's where Willie T went to try to get his start. Danica Patrick spent some time over there trying to do things. Alex Rossi, I think, was over there in Europe trying to do some stuff.
Yes.
But that's one of the things that was unsuccessful for Michael Andretti when he went to try to do it, because he was doing all this stuff over here. Then he tried to show up over there in Europe. They didn't really know who he was. Didn't have really much respect for him for the most part, even though he's Mario's son. You would think that there would be a lot of doors opening, but, it didn't really seem that way. And so he just wasn't prepared. So to be prepared to race in Formula One, you have to start out really young. You have to, infiltrate yourself into that culture, know how to race over there, know how the politics is played over there, because that is just as important, the politics of racing, as the sport of racing is. Don't let anybody tell you there's no politics of racing. So you got to know all that stuff. Now, how do you do that? To build a feeder system so that happens? Well, it would have to be started out by somebody over here in the States that wants to see a, American become a Formula One champion. I don't know who's ready to do that. I mean, when you think about the open wheel series that are over here in terms of IndyCar, they're interested in, people racing over here in the States in IndyCar. And so they are stepping, their ladder is like Formula Mazda, Formula Atlantic, whatever the formulas are, Indy Lights, that sort of thing. That get you to being able to race at the top level of racing here in the States. So it's going to be a completely different paradigm shift and program put in place to get somebody over here to be successful over there. And it's not going to be simple, because it's going to take cubic dollars. It's going to take a lot of money to support somebody coming up at a young age and going through the ranks over in Europe. That means all the schooling and education, all the, the cost of living and all that kind of stuff, the cost to prepare the car and the fuel the car, all those things. It's a huge undertaking. So I don't know what the answer to that's going to be, but I can tell you it's going to take a lot of time and effort and resources.
Do you think it would help if a Penske or a Andretti would get into Formula One, if Ford decided to want to get into Formula One, become an engine supplier, maybe put a program together? Do you think getting those guys in somehow or getting them interested in getting into Formula One would help?
Oh, absolutely. It would. There's no question that would help, but I just question whether or not there would be any interest from any of those groups that you mentioned in doing that. Because, here we like our American racing. That's all there is to it. We, NASCAR, IndyCar, sports cars with IMSA, those are our platforms. Formula One is interesting, but it is just almost like a foreign country to us. That's why it's really going to be hard to get an American to get into Formula One and to be successful in Formula One, is because it doesn't resonate here. I hope somebody starts thinking out of the box and can open, those channels so that it changes, just like with regard to what's going on with the movement with Black Lives Matter and such. But it's gonna take somebody with a big commitment to make that happen. And I don't know who that is. I don't feel that Penske is going to be interested in doing that, or Ganassi, or Ford, or GM. Especially with regard to the way American business is going right now. Everybody's hurting financially. So yeah. I just don't see anybody stepping up and meeting that challenge.
Yeah. When you were talking earlier about the background you come from a very white collar background. Your dad worked for IBM. you work for HP, you have a degree in engineering and science. I mean, you obviously, not typical race car driver background. So I have to ask you though, are you Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh, Trek.
Trek.
I just like the old school Trek.
Even
though it's like sappy and campy. Yeah, it's sappy and campy when you watch it, but I still, Star Trek was my thing way back in the day. There've been so many Star Wars movies that I and they came out so spread out. I lost interest. I look at a Star Wars thing and I'm like, what is that? So, but Star Trek, just like, again, NASCAR, it was like on all the time. You knew it was coming on. You could follow it. It wasn't like, here's the Star Wars movie, episode 1, 20 years ago, and the next one you got to wait 5 years for. It's like, so consistency goes a long way.
I'm a next generation guy, but I went back and started watching a lot more of the, older series with William Shatner. So I started watching a lot of, and I have a lot of respect for it. I mean, it was groundbreaking at its time, for the things that they did, writing and the narratives that were going on. That were just, I think they really were ahead of their time, and going into next generation, they just expanded on what was built in the original series.
Mm-hmm. No, I feel the same way. I just think that, like you said, Star Trek was ahead of its time. It was futuristic. It got you thinking, wow, this is, it made you think. It just really opened your mind up and everything. But now, I mean, there's just so many platforms for entertainment and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it just doesn't, now these mediums don't really have the impact that like a Star Trek did then, because there were so few different things that you could watch and that you could really follow and get into. Now, I mean, there are so many platforms for entertainment. It's like, I don't know how you capture anybody's interest nowadays.
It's a field of streaming services now. I mean, you have your pick of the litter of what you want to watch, and there's so much to watch. You're just overloaded at times.
You're absolutely right. It's like trying to get my family together to watch a single program is almost impossible, because we all have our different interests and tastes. We can't agree on what we want to watch. So all of a sudden, what starts out to be a family get together and watching TV, 20 minutes into it, well, I'm out. Yep, yeah, I'm out too.
It is. It really is. I just recently watched Hamilton this weekend,
Okay, cool.
And it was amazing. I mean, just a brilliant, well put together play that was just absolutely wonderful to watch. I hate that I didn't get a chance to watch it live in the theater, and the video version is great. And I recommend anybody to watch it because it was absolutely wonderful to watch.
Well, I was blessed and fortunate enough to actually see it on Broadway, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I haven't seen it, on Disney Plus yet, but what a production. I mean, it's phenomenal. Yeah. I recommend that for anybody. I haven't talked or heard from anybody who didn't like it.
Yeah, it really was. And that's the one thing I'm going to miss right now during this pandemic is missing going to plays, because I enjoy going to plays. I've been to Wicked, I've been to Les Mis and Rob, and, I've seen quite a few plays, and I'm just something, the theater experience is something that's just separated from anything else that you can go see, when seeing the arts.
Well, it's amazing, in light of the situation that we're in with, sheltering in place and all that kind of stuff. So many things that you took for granted before, you just miss them now, things that you're like, you just never even thought about. Now you think about it. It's like, well, is it safe to go out and walk? Do I need to bring a mask? And I mean, just all these things that you're like, well, Are you kidding me? I mean, it's such a shame. It's so sad. And like I said, kind of before, I really think it's a tragedy for my kids, for my sons, because it's like, they're just cooped up. They can't hang out with their friends, I mean, everything is virtual with their phone, and it's just not like it should be. They should be out and, enjoying playing around outside and hanging out, and you can't hardly do that without concern and, fear.
Exactly. Have you ever thought of, have your sons ever been interested in racing, or have you thought about wanting them to get into racing?
I'll tell you what, I did what I believe every parent should do. Expose your kids to as many different things as possible. And so, needless to say, I put my kids in go-karts for a minute, just, not competitively per se, but, just goofing around. And there was no fire. There was no passion. And I was completely good with that. My wallet was over the moon. You know what? I know how much it costs. And if one of them or both of them wanted to get involved, I just don't know how I would be able to afford it. Even with the, the resources I have in terms of people I know and the things that I know and ins and outs. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to strike a check, and so it's like my sons were like, nah, Dad, I'm good. I'm like, okay, I'm good too.
Oh wow! But you've been doing some karting, and because you never really went through a lot of formal training into racing, and you're just now karting. What's the karting experience been like for you?
Well, I was karting for a very, very short time. I went through my professional road racing career, and that ended in 2012. But that same year, I was out there just at a kart track in Florida, renting a cart, a shifter cart, just because I just wanted to scratch the itch, right? And the guy who owned the kart track actually owned a kart team. And he was watching me going around, and he said, you want to enter a kart race? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And so, started karting with him. And the next thing you know, he's grooming me for, and this is 50 years of age, okay? He's grooming me for international Rotax karting competition. So believe it or not, I was part of, after I went through the ranks of, challenge races and qualifying races and all that kind of stuff to get me to the point where I was on Team USA. We got there to Portimao, Portugal, and this was in 2012. And I'm representing Team USA in DD2 Masters, which is guys 36 and up, I guess. So I'm really old for these. So these guys are still young to me, but I'm still out there duking it out in a kart. And it's funny, I am writing a memoir and actually kind of finishing it up. I'm getting close, called Winning in Reverse. And it's Winning in Reverse is a motivational memoir, first of all, because it's one of really living your dreams and, taking risks and, networking. I name about 8 certain attributes that allowed me to be successful in my living my dream. And it's called Winning in Reverse because I became a professional race car driver, which was my dream, completely opposite of the way it's supposed to happen. You're supposed to be at a very young age in some sort of competitive race car, whether it be a quarter midget, kart, whatever. And then going through the ranks as you get up into your teenage years.
Right.
My teenage years went right on by me, still no racing, right? 22 years of age, I started out in SECA in a full-size race car. I become a professional race car driver at 40. And then my last competitive racing is at 50 years of age, and I finally get to race a car. So that's why it's Winning in Reverse. And so it'll be out February 2nd of next year, and I'm hoping that it does really well. We anticipate it will. I'm going to have some blurbs from some very prominent people that I think will help move it along. But yeah, I've been very fortunate. It wasn't easy. It was been fighting and scratching and clawing the whole way. Lots of doubters and naysayers. I can only imagine what Bubba Wallace is dealing with regard to, the position on the Confederate flag that NASCAR supported him on.
Yeah.
But it's a very tough road to hoe. I don't care who you are, black, white, male, female, it's very tough. But being, a Black American male is another level of difficulty. So the fact is that I made it though, and I'm proud of that. And I just hope that things continue to change in terms of more guys like Bubba out there, somebody that looks like Bubba or I out there in an Indy car, other guys like Lewis Hamilton out there looking, like he does in Formula One. We have a couple guys in drag racing. Fortunately, we got Antron Brown and J.R. Todd at the NHRA level, and it's much more gender diverse. We got women driving in NHRA. I don't know why NHRA is so successful.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to look at their model. I think it may have to do with the fact that it's so easy to go drag racing by comparison to this other stuff, because
seems like they have a real grassroots.
Exactly.
Following.
Exactly. As soon as you get a car, you can, drag race it, You can't go out there and go oval track racing as soon as you get a car. You can't go out there, and road race as soon as you get a car.
Right.
Anybody can go stoplight to stoplight, right? So it's a little bit more easily exposed to. But no, I just think that we're in an era now where we're at change, and I think that the momentum will continue to carry forward because we have prominent people using their platform to continue to push things forward, whether it be Bubba Wallace, whether it be Lewis Hamilton, whether it be me on the small platform I have, whether it be Willie T, what he's doing. There's been some folks that have actually just said, okay, let's continue to try to make this a reality. Let's try to make this sport and this country more inclusive, more diverse. Let's stop dealing with racism, systemic racism, and police brutality, and treat each other like we were created as equals.
Bill, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking with us and spending time with us here. I mean, this has been absolutely an incredible moment talking with you and getting your insight on everything, and I really look forward to talking to you again.
That sounds good, Seth. I enjoyed our time as well.
We want to thank Bill Lester for joining us here on the Rundown. And as always, my friends, I'll see you when the lights go out.